Her name was Olivia Hayes, the woman whose own family had just publicly humiliated her in the middle of her grandmother's funeral. It happened so quickly that many people inside the church barely had time to react. Lily Hayes, Olivia's 11-year-old daughter, was holding a small white rose in her hands. She walked slowly toward the casket of Eleanor Hayes, the great-grandmother she loved more than anyone in the world. But just a few steps before reaching the casket, a hand suddenly grabbed her wrist. "I don't think she should be standing here." The voice cut through the silence like ice. It was Brandon Hayes, Olivia's older brother. Every eye in the room immediately turned toward them. Lily looked up in surprise. "Uncle Brandon." But Brandon did not let go. He glanced around the room, then spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This is a Hayes family funeral, not a place for people who only show up when there's an inheritance involved." The atmosphere inside the church instantly froze. Olivia rose from her seat. Her heart pounded so hard it felt loud enough for everyone to hear. "What are you talking about?" Brandon turned toward his sister. The smirk on his face made several people visibly uncomfortable. "I'm telling the truth." He pointed directly at Lily. "That girl doesn't even carry the Hayes name." A few whispers spread through the room. Some people lowered their eyes to avoid looking at Olivia. Others watched quietly, almost as if they were waiting for an entertaining spectacle to unfold. The most painful part wasn't what Brandon said. It was the silence that followed. No one stepped forward to defend Lily. No one said a word. Even Margaret Hayes, Brandon's wife, the woman who had hugged Lily countless times during Christmas gatherings, quietly looked away. Olivia stepped forward. She gently pulled her daughter behind her. "She came here to say goodbye to her great-grandmother." Brandon laughed. "Then let her place the flower and leave." He tilted his head slightly. "Or are you hoping your name shows up in the will?" Several relatives exchanged uneasy glances. At the back of the church, family attorney Richard Collins frowned. He was the only person who knew the full contents of Eleanor's will, and he knew very well that what Brandon feared had little to do with money alone. Olivia noticed the look on his face. A sudden sense of unease ran down her spine. For years, she had been the one everyone underestimated. While Brandon ran their father's construction company, while the rest of the family attended lavish parties and social events, Olivia had chosen a quieter life. Very few people knew she worked for a major financial auditing corporation in Atlanta. Even fewer knew that the reports she supervised were worth tens of millions of dollars. To the Hayes family, Olivia was still the failed daughter who had left town years ago, and she had never bothered correcting them. Lily tightened her grip on her mother's hand. Her eyes were red with tears. "Mom!" Olivia knelt beside her. "What is it, sweetheart?" Lily bit her lip. The next question felt like a knife, twisting inside Olivia's chest. "Why do they hate us?" Olivia didn't answer right away, because she had spent nearly 20 years asking herself the very same question. Ever since she was a little girl sitting alone at family gatherings, ever since her achievements were ignored, ever since Brandon became the perfect child in everyone's eyes, Olivia wrapped her arms around her daughter. "Not everyone knows how to love other people." Lily nodded softly. But the hurt remained in her eyes. The service continued. The memorial music played quietly through the church. One by one, people approached the casket to place their flowers. But Olivia could no longer focus. She began noticing things she hadn't seen before. Every time Brandon's eyes met Richard Collins, he quickly looked away. Two of her aunts kept whispering to each other. Even the priest seemed to sense the tension spreading through the room. Something was being hidden. Some secret far bigger than the insults that had just been thrown at her and Lily. When the funeral finally ended, people slowly began leaving the church. Olivia was preparing to walk Lily back to the car when she heard a voice behind her. "Miss Olivia." She turned around. Richard Collins was standing there. The elderly attorney was holding a brown envelope tightly in his hand. He looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he lowered his voice. "Before she passed away, Eleanor left this for you." Olivia frowned slightly. "My grandmother?" Richard nodded, "And she instructed me to place it directly into your hands after the funeral." Olivia took the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. Whatever was inside, it felt like more than just paperwork. Richard studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that made the blood in her veins run cold. "There are truths your family has buried for many years." He paused. "And Eleanor wanted you to be the first person to know all of them." Olivia stood motionless in the parking lot. The evening wind moved gently through the trees. Beside her, Lily still held the unfinished bouquet of white flowers, and in Olivia's hands rested an envelope that had the power to change everything she had ever believed about her family. That night, Olivia Hayes barely slept. The brown envelope remained on the kitchen table. For hours, she simply sat there staring at it. Outside the window, pale yellow streetlights cast a lonely glow across the yard. Lily had fallen asleep long ago, but Olivia knew that their lives might be about to change forever. Finally, she took a deep breath and opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was slightly shaky, but instantly familiar. It was Eleanor's. Olivia's hands trembled as she read the first lines. "If you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer here to tell you the truth myself." Her chest tightened. The words that followed plunged the kitchen into absolute silence. Eleanor did not write about property. She did not write about money. She wrote about regret. For years, she had watched Olivia be treated unfairly within her own family. She knew Brandon had always been favored. She knew Olivia's accomplishments were often dismissed. She knew cruel rumors had slowly pushed her away from the family. But what left Olivia speechless was what came after the letter. There were copies of financial records, bank transactions, documents marked with red ink. In the margin of one page, Eleanor had written a short note. "Look into these transfers." Olivia frowned. Rows of numbers filled page after page, dates, company names, account holders, every single one of them connected to Brandon. As a financial auditor, this was her field of expertise. It was also the career her family had always treated as insignificant. Yet after only a few minutes of reviewing the documents, Olivia noticed something unusual. Large sums of money had been routed through intermediary companies. Several transactions occurred around the same time her grandfather had passed away years earlier, and none of the amounts were small. A cold chill ran down her spine. Eleanor had not sent these records by accident. She was trying to tell her something. Olivia continued turning the pages. Halfway through the file, an old photograph appeared. It showed her grandfather, Thomas Hayes, standing in front of a wooden cabin beside a lake. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note, "The final asset." Olivia had never seen the place before. She had never heard anyone in the family mention it, but what caught her attention even more was the business card tucked behind the photograph. The name on it was Michael Donovan, Thomas Hayes' personal accountant for nearly 20 years. Beneath the card was another handwritten message. "If anything happens, find him." The next morning, Olivia called the number. An older man answered. After a few minutes of conversation, the line went completely silent. Then he asked a question. "Are you Olivia Hayes?" "Yes. I've been waiting for this call for almost 10 years. Olivia sat up straight. "Why?" Michael let out a long sigh. "Because Eleanor always knew there would come a day when you discovered the truth." 2 hours later, they met at a small cafe on the outskirts of Savannah. Michael arrived carrying an old leather briefcase. He studied Olivia for a long moment before opening it. Inside were dozens of folders. "I've been keeping these at Thomas's request." Olivia felt her heartbeat quicken. Michael pulled out an aging stack of yellowed documents. "Your grandfather never trusted Brandon." Olivia froze. "What do you mean?" Michael looked directly into her eyes. Before he passed away, Thomas discovered that someone had been interfering with the family's investments. The air between them suddenly felt heavy. Was that person Brandon? Michael didn't answer immediately, but his silence was more frightening than any response. He opened another folder. This is why Thomas created a secret trust. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. "A trust?" Michael nodded. A significant portion of the family's largest assets never appeared in any records Brandon had access to. For the first time in years, Olivia didn't know what to say. Everything she believed about her family was beginning to crumble. But the biggest shock was still ahead. Michael pulled out one final document, then he placed it in front of her. This trust has a beneficiary. Olivia looked down. The name at the top of the first page made her breath catch. It wasn't Brandon. It wasn't anyone else in the Hayes family. It was Lily Hayes, her daughter. Olivia immediately looked up. That's impossible. Michael slowly nodded. That's exactly why some people never wanted you to learn the truth. At that same moment, several miles away, Brandon Hayes was receiving a phone call. A relative had just seen Olivia meeting with Michael Donovan. The color drained from Brandon's face. He jumped to his feet. The coffee cup on his desk tipped over and spilled across the table. For the first time in many years, Brandon was genuinely afraid, because he knew exactly what Michael Donovan was holding. And if Olivia uncovered the entire truth, everything Brandon had spent 2 decades building could collapse within days. Meanwhile, Olivia remained seated in silence, staring at the documents in front of her. Outside the cafe window, sunlight reflected softly across the lake, and before her lay the biggest secret the Hayes family had hidden for years, a secret involving wealth, betrayal, and the future of her daughter. She still didn't know what she would do next, but for the first time in her life, Olivia understood the one thing Brandon had always feared most. The truth was finally beginning to surface. Her name was Olivia Hayes, and that morning, for the first time in more than 20 years, she walked into the family home without carrying fear with her. Brandon Hayes was the one who had called the meeting. News had spread quickly after the funeral. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and close family friends had all gathered at the old Hayes house. On the surface, Brandon claimed he wanted to clear up the misunderstandings that had begun circulating. But deep down, he knew the real reason. Olivia had met with Michael Donovan, and that fact alone had kept him awake for 2 straight nights. The large living room of the old house was packed with people. Olivia sat at the far end of the table. A black briefcase rested in front of her. No one knew what was inside. Brandon stood beside the fireplace, the same expensive suit, the same confident posture everyone was used to seeing, but his eyes kept drifting toward the briefcase. He was the first to speak. "Thank you all for coming." His voice remained calm. "Our family has just suffered a major loss. I don't want baseless rumors destroying what we have." Several relatives nodded in agreement. Brandon continued. "There are people trying to create Sherry's claiming that I've hidden family assets." He looked directly at Olivia. "I think it's time we clear everything up." The tension in the room immediately tightened. Olivia slowly opened the briefcase. A thick file landed on the table. The sound of paper touching wood was quiet, but it was enough to make several people flinch. "I agree." Brandon gave a faint smile. "Do you actually have any proof?" Olivia didn't answer right away. She removed copies of financial transactions, then tax records, then documents Michael Donovan had safeguarded for years. With every page she placed on the table, the smile on Brandon's face faded a little more. One of the uncles picked up a file. He scanned several lines. Then his expression changed. "What is this?" An aunt immediately leaned over to look. Curiosity quickly turned into shock. Olivia stood up. For the first time, her voice carried clearly through the room. For years, family funds were routed through intermediary companies. People began turning toward Brandon. Olivia continued. "Every one of those companies is directly connected to him." Brandon laughed. "But it sounded forced." "That's ridiculous." "Exactly," Olivia nodded. "Which is why I had everything independently verified." She placed an audit report on the table. The room instantly fell silent. Brandon stopped smiling. The first person to speak was Aunt Carol. "Brandon," her voice trembled, "you told me those funds were being used to maintain family properties." Brandon didn't answer. He simply clenched both fists. Olivia looked around the room. For the first time, she saw doubt in the eyes of people who had always stood by her brother. But the real shock had not arrived yet. Olivia pulled out the final file. It contained the secret trust established by Thomas Hayes. "I think everyone should see this." At that moment, Michael Donovan stepped forward from the back of the room. The sight of him made Brandon go pale. Many people immediately recognized the elderly accountant. For years, he had been Thomas Hayes's most trusted advisor. If Michael Donovan was standing here today, then the situation was far more serious than anyone had imagined. Michael opened the file. This document was created before Thomas Hayes passed away. Everyone held their breath. He was concerned that the family's assets might eventually fall under the control of a single individual. Every eye in the room shifted toward Brandon. Michael continued. That is why he established a separate trust. One of the younger cousins jumped to his feet. Where is this trust now? Michael turned to the final page. It remains fully active. The room erupted. Voices filled the air. Questions came from every direction. Brandon stepped forward. That's enough. For the first time, his voice cracked with emotion. You have no right to reveal that. Michael calmly looked at him. I do. Then he presented another document. Because I am the appointed trustee. Brandon froze. Olivia witnessed something she had never seen before. Fear. It was written plainly across the face of the man who had spent years controlling everyone around him, but the final blow came from a place no one expected. The living room door opened. A teenage boy stepped inside. It was Ethan Hayes, Brandon's son. He had heard the entire conversation from the hallway. Ethan looked directly at his father. His eyes were filled with disappointment and pain. Did you lie to everyone? No one spoke. Brandon opened his mouth, but no words came out. Ethan took a step backward. For years you told me Aunt Olivia was selfish. His voice broke. But you're the one who hid everything. Those words hurt more than any financial report ever could. Because for the first time, Brandon wasn't just losing the trust of his family, he was beginning to lose his own son. Inside the crowded room, the atmosphere completely changed. The man who once held all the power had become the center of suspicion. And Olivia, the woman who had always been treated like an outsider, was now the only person bringing the truth to light. But she knew the story wasn't over yet, because Michael Donovan still possessed one final document, a secret clause hidden within Eleanor Hayes' will. And judging by the serious look in his eyes, that clause had the power to change the fate of the entire family. And the moment attorney Richard Collins opened the final document on the table, almost no one in the room could remain calm. No one spoke. No one moved. Everyone waited. Because they all understood that if Eleanor Hayes had truly left behind a secret clause, it could change everything. Richard adjusted his glasses. He slowly scanned the room. Then he opened the final version of the will. His voice echoed through the silence. This supplemental provision was signed by Eleanor Hayes 6 months before her passing. Brandon sat frozen in his chair. The confidence he once carried was gone. The man who had controlled every conversation for years could now do nothing but stare at the papers in front of him. Richard continued reading. If the documents related to the secret trust are disclosed and legally verified, authority over the assets shall be transferred to the heir Eleanor Hayes trusted most. Several people gasped. Brandon immediately jumped to his feet. That's impossible. Richard didn't even look at him. He simply continued. The designated individual is Olivia Hayes. The entire room fell silent. Even Olivia was stunned. She never imagined she would hear those words. For years, she had been overlooked, ignored, treated as though she was never good enough. Yet in Eleanor's eyes, she had been the only person worthy of trust. Brandon shook his head repeatedly. No. He was practically shouting now. No. That can't be right. Richard calmly placed the will on the table. All documents have been legally verified. A heavy silence settled over the room. Then something happened that no one expected. Ethan stood up. He walked directly toward Olivia. Not toward his father. Toward Olivia. Aunt Olivia. His voice was quiet but clear. I'm sorry. Olivia looked up. Ethan lowered his head. For years, I believed everything my father said about you. He fought to keep his composure, but now I know I was wrong. For the first time since the meeting began, Olivia felt some of the anger inside her begin to fade, not because of Brandon, because of Ethan. The boy had also been a victim of years of lies. Across the room, Brandon lowered his head. He no longer argued, he no longer fought back. Every piece of evidence was now on the table. The truth had won. One by one, relatives approached Olivia. Some apologized for remaining silent for too long. Others admitted they had listened to rumors about her without ever questioning whether they were true. Those apologies came late, very late, but at least they were sincere. The meeting ended as the sun began to set. People gradually left the house. The large home slowly grew quiet. Olivia stepped onto the front porch. The evening breeze carried a welcome sense of peace. For the first time in years, she felt like she could finally breathe. Richard Collins walked toward her. He handed her another envelope. The final letter. Olivia accepted it. The familiar handwriting immediately caught her eye. It was Eleanor's. The letter was shorter than the first one, but every line brought tears to her eyes. I know how much you have suffered. I am sorry I wasn't brave enough to protect you sooner, but I have always been proud of you. Olivia stopped reading. For years, no one had ever said those words to her. Not her parents. Not her brother. Not anyone in the family. Except Eleanor. A single tear slipped silently onto the page. That evening, when Olivia returned home, Lily was waiting for her on the sofa. The girl immediately ran over. Is everything okay, Mom? Olivia smiled. A real smile. Perhaps the first genuine smile she had worn since the funeral. Everything's okay, sweetheart. Did we win? Olivia gently shook her head. No. Lily looked confused. Then what happened? Olivia sat down beside her daughter. She gently brushed a hand through Lily's hair. We didn't defeat anyone. We simply found the truth. Lily thought about that for a few seconds. Then she rested her head against her mother's shoulder. Outside the window, the first lights of the evening began to glow. One chapter had ended. A new life was waiting ahead. Several months later, Olivia decided to sell the portion of the inheritance she had received. She didn't want to spend the rest of her life fighting over the past. The money was placed into an education fund for Lily. Part of it was used to help children in need throughout the community. It was exactly what Eleanor would have wanted. On the day they moved into their new home, Lily carried a small framed photograph. In it, Eleanor Hayes was smiling beneath the summer sun. Lily carefully placed the picture on a bookshelf, then stepped back to admire it. I think Great-Grandma would like this place. Olivia looked at the photograph. A soft smile touched her lips. I think so too. Because in the end, the most valuable thing Eleanor left behind wasn't property. It wasn't houses. It wasn't money. It was the truth that freed a woman from years of pain and gave a child the chance to grow up without ever doubting her own worth. Sometimes family isn't defined by the people who share your blood. Family is made up of the people who choose to love you when they have every opportunity not to. And sometimes the most powerful form of revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's living a genuinely happy life after walking away from those who once hurt you.